Hong Kong program. Sorry for being a little late. There's a little technical issue just now, but I think I'm glad that my team has resolved it. It is a great honor today to invite the Prince Turki AlFaisal from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to be our guest of honor. This segment is open to the public, and so as a result, everything you say will be on the record. So we're delighted that Prince Turki can be with us. As many of you know, Prince Turki is a global trustee of the ASHK Society, but of course his distinguished career prior is truly amazing. Many of you know his father, AlFaisal, right? King Faisal, the second king second person to serve as king after the founding of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia by King Abdul Aziz. And today, Prince Turki is heading the foundation that bears his father's name. And Prince Turki himself has an extraordinarily distinguished career. He was at age 32 already head of the intelligence community of Saudi Arabia. And then he later, after decades in that position, he became the kingdom's ambassador to UK, and followed by the ambassadorship to the United States. So thank you, Prince Turki, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you very much.
A very general question.
Yes,
the Middle East has always, for some reason, been in the center of the whole earth. And sorry to say, perhaps also in the center of a lot of the troubles in the world. Do you have any opinion on why that is the case, why the Middle East is so problematic?
Well, I think if you look at a historic perspective, along with China, civilization, as it were, was birthed. Whether it was in the Mesopotamian valley or in the Nile Valley, and subsequently spreading from there to Europe and other parts of the world, began in our part of the world and drew the attention of others to it. I'll just give you one example. I think it is in the 9th century, the Christian calendar, the Abbasid Caliphate entered into initially a war with China that resulted in a treaty being signed between Baghdad and the Empire of China at the time. That led to a very important civilizational development throughout the world. For example, paper, which was invented in China, moved from China through the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad and the Arab world to the rest of the world. Silk, the famous cloth that the Chinese are very much famous for, also followed in that development. Other developments, pottery, explosives, etc., but also from the other side, various things also from our part of the world moved to China, whether it was the spread of the Islamic faith into China during if I remember correctly, after Kublai Khan and other rulers who came into Asia and some of them into China as well. They imported Muslim technocrats to help build cities like Beijing, for example, and other such developments there. The famous Admiral Hong Chi, I think was his name, if I'm correctly pronouncing it.
No, Zheng He.
Zheng He, okay. He was a Muslim who actually performed the pilgrimage from China, bringing a fleet of Chinese ships to the port of Jeddah, which I think you visited that port.
Yes, I've been
yourself, Ronnie.
Yeah.
So the relationship from our part of the world was not just confined to China, but equally became a center of attention of the world. The Greeks took their knowledge from the ancient Egyptians. And when they developed their military capabilities, if you remember, Alexander the Great, his first military excursion was to come to our part of the world, to take over in the Near East and to fight against the Persian Empire at that time. These are just examples I'm giving, historic examples going way back, Yani, that show that our part of the world has grown and was equally influential in other parts of the world. If you don't consider the religious developments in our part of the world, the three so-called revealed religions from God through prophets, Abraham, and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad and all those prophets in between were born and grew up and some were killed in our part of the world. So yes, that also added that religious addition. We're still the interest of other countries. And since the Second World War, as if you remember, during the Cold War, there was big competition between the Soviet Union and the West or Middle. We have the trade routes from the east to the west coming through the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, through the Red Sea to the Suez Canal, the oil export coming through the Hormuz Strait in the Gulf. We call it the Arab Gulf. The Persians call it the Persian Gulf. Equally give importance to the stability and security, and also draw the ambitions and the politics and interest of other countries. So sometimes harshly beaten on the head by some others, like the Mongols. If you remember the Mongols, they swept through China and and the rest of the world, and actually in their track they destroyed a lot of civilizations, but then others were replaced with them. So I hope I'm answering your question that way, Ronnie.
Thank you. Now let me turn to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia itself. A lot of people are very much affected by what happened in the last couple of decades, forgetting that before 1979, perhaps that region was quite different. Among other things, the oil shock of 73 and then 79, that changed a lot of things. But also in 1979, two things happened that sticks out in my mind. I lived through those periods as I was already adult working. And that is the downfall of the Shah of Iran, and brought in the religious fanaticism in Iran, number one. And number two, the siege of the Grand Mosque in Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Before that, for example, there were direct flights between Tehran and Tel Aviv, for example. But after 1979, the whole thing changed. And then it seems to me, as an outsider looking in, that Saudi Arabia become a little bit more conservative, shall I say, religiously speaking. And then with your crown prince right now, that is your cousin, I understand, it seems that he is making really serious changes to relax some of the perhaps religious regulations. So where do you see your kingdom going in the coming years, in the coming few years?
Let me add a third thing to the two seminal issues that you mentioned, which had a direct effect, not just on Saudi Arabia, but on the world, which was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. It also occurred in 1979. Amazing, 1 year can have such three dramatic and explosive developments taking place in different parts of the world.
And 2022 may be another one of those years, but we'll come back to that later.
Anyway, so as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, like any society, I still consider Saudi Arabia to be a work in progress. We're a relatively young country that has developed since 1932 into the unified Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with a very long ancient history as a land and as a people. And so that by itself was a change in stature for the area where the kingdom is. Before that, that geographic area was a collection of city-states, Bedouin tribes, etc., that were fighting each other and so on. But King Abdulaziz, as you mentioned, managed to bring them together and make a state out of them.
That's your grandfather.
Yes. And so religion in Saudi Arabia comes from the part that, excuse me, Ronnie, 1 second. Someone is knocking at the door. I'll be right back.
Sure. Prince Turki is right now in Germany. He was in Paris, but he's now in Germany, and that's why he is perhaps somebody, I don't know, in the hotel room is delivering food or something. But I want to take this opportunity to encourage all our members to join as the President Circle members. Previously, we had 45 minutes of private discussion with Prince Turki. For those of you who missed it, join as a PC member, then you can join the whole program with Prince Turki. Prince Turki, please continue.
Yes. And so the birthplace of Islam is in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, where the Prophet was born and started preaching Islam. And then in Medina, where he developed the state of Islam. And from there, it expanded into the rest of the world. And being such precious holy places for 1.3 or 4 billion people around the world, the kingdom is very much a servitor to the holy places and to the people who come for pilgrimage. By the way, today is the first day of the month of the pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. And so we're receiving already, post-COVID, the first international pilgrimage groups coming after the 2-year ban on the arrival of pilgrims from other countries. From that context, religion has always been a part and parcel of Saudi Arabia's makeup and composition. And when you mentioned the attack on the Holy Mosque in 1979, this was something that was so unimaginable at the time that nobody expected anyone in their right mind would develop such a ferocious attitude towards the holy places, like that small group of fanatics who attacked the mosque. I was then director of intelligence in Saudi Arabia, and I remember observing some of these individuals who took the audacious step to occupy the Holy Mosque. And I admit I was taken by surprise, along with other government security institutions in the kingdom, when they did use weapons to hijack the Holy Mosque in Mecca. That led to a very important crisis in the not just the identity of who we are as Muslims, but also in looking at ourselves and saying, how could anyone like that come out of us? And so a state of taking back and introversion took place in Saudi society that sought in religious practice a means of opposing such a fanatic and murderous attitude in those people. And hence the society did turn more conservative. Not just the government, the whole society turned more conservative. And the teaching of religion and so on became a primary interest of the society. Over the years, from I would say 1979 until I would say 2001, when another seminal event took place, this time not in Saudi Arabia, but in New York, with the attack on the Twin Towers by a group that calls itself Muslims, a band composed of mostly Saudi individuals, 15 of the 20 or so, or 19 individuals who did that were Saudis, again, made us go through an identity crisis. How could these people have come out of us and be so opposed to Saudi beliefs and practices and so on? So that is from where I think the kingdom's gradual dismantling of the very extremist ideology, not just in Saudi Arabia, but in other Muslim countries as well, began to take effect. And we saw the combating of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda as being the primary interest of Saudi, not just the Saudi government, but the Saudi people. And since 2001, I can, alhamdulillah, turn and say that we managed to beat this Al-Qaeda group from doing any more harm, not just in the kingdom, but as we cooperate with others around the world in preventing terrorist acts, let's say in the United States or in Europe or in other parts of the world. But it's a work in progress. Terrorism, I think, will continue to be with us, unfortunately, as history has shown, under one guise or another. This time it is so-called Islamist terrorism. If you remember with me, Ronnie, in the 1970s and early 80s in Europe, there was the so-called the Red Brigades in Italy, the Baader-Meinhof group in Germany, even in Japan, they had the Red Army faction. All of them used terrorism, and not being Muslim, definitely, they still thought of terrorism as a way of achieving political goals. So the kingdom is very much in the lead in the fight against such extremist ideology. And as I mentioned in our private discussion earlier, the kingdom has been the victim of all of these extremist groups that try to hijack our religion and turn it into a very negative and nihilistic attitude towards the world. What Prince Mohammed bin Salman has done, our crown prince, is that he has called on us as Saudis to go back to the original roots of Islam during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, when peace and prosperity and security were the mainstay of the Muslim state at that time. And that was to choose within the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad the ones that he actually practiced, and not the ones that later on were added by scholars or by politicians or by other issues. So that is still being worked out, not just in Saudi Arabia, because the Muslim world extends all over the world, from China through Africa, through Europe and America and so on. And this is where we are at the moment. We're still engaged in formulating ideas and ways of permanently removing from Muslim teaching any effort to go the extreme route of these groups that have done so much harm. I hope I answered your question in a long roundabout way.
Thank you. Just a minor question. Most of my members here, I assume, have not been to the kingdom. And one reason I understand must be because it's very difficult to visa. And I'm privileged to have been there 5-7 times, and I enjoyed it tremendously. And I even brought, with your help, the board of the ASHK Society when I was the co-chair to your kingdom. It was really a fantastic trip. So do you think that the kingdom will open up to tourism one of these days? I'm sure many of my members would like to go, and I strongly encourage them. If they can go, they should go. And maybe you can take 2 weeks, 1 week in Saudi Arabia, and then another week maybe in Israel and Egypt and something like that. That'll be a fantastic opportunity.
Well, Ronnie, I can tell you, that the kingdom has done that. Now tourist visas are available online. You can, go online on Saudi embassy or Saudi consulate in Hong Kong or wherever you want, and they will direct you to the tourism department, and you can get your visa, as I've been told by visitors recently, in not more than 5 minutes. So please urge your members to come, and if any of them will decide to do that, just tell me, and I hope to be able to meet with them when they get there.
Thank you, Turkey. The only problem, only caveat I warn my members is the following. If you want to know how poor you are, go to Saudi Arabia. And then I remember in one of the hotels, I knocked on the door of my own hotel room, and it's solid wood. I said, I don't know of any wood 1,000 miles in any direction. But do you ship all the hard wood to make this door? And there's just one door. So I think, well, but anyway, I think Hong Kong people can afford a little bit of luxury for a week or two. But you mentioned about the island that I just read about it. I didn't go deep into it. That Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and who else are doing some island development in the Red Sea?
No, let's not go ahead of
another one that is
ourselves.
between you and Egypt.
Yeah, these islands, part of Saudi Arabia, are at the mouth, if you like, of the Gulf of Aqaba. Which goes from the Red Sea into Aqaba in Jordan, and the city of so-called Eilat in Israel, and the east side of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. And in 1956, if I remember correctly, or even before that, the kingdom rented or ceded these islands to Egypt because of the Arab-Israeli dispute at that time. So Egypt actually ran these islands for defensive purposes from then until maybe 6 years ago, when Saudi Arabia, in agreement with Egypt, returned these islands to Saudi sovereignty. And the lease terms ended at that time for Egypt. Now, in the meantime, in 1967 and 1973, 2 wars took place between Israel and the Arab world, which led to the establishment of international monitors in that part of the Gulf of Aqaba. And these islands, because they were then under the direction of Egypt, were somehow connected to the monitoring system of the peace regulations between Egypt and Israel. So the process now, Saudi Arabia having regained control of these islands, is to negotiate some form of agreement in addition to the prior agreements between Egypt and Israel as far as monitoring by the United Nations of the traffic in the Gulf of Aqaba. That is as far as it goes. It does not go yet into Saudi-Israeli direct engagement, but it is more about Saudi-Egyptian United Nations agreements on monitoring of the shipping in that lane. Maybe in the future, if we have peace with Israel, I'm sure prospects for developing tourism and other issues there with Israel will come around, and it will be beneficial to all of us.
Do you see, Prince Turki, ever in our lifetime? I'm sure you don't mind. You're a public figure. You were born 45. I was born 49, so we are a few years apart, but not much. Do you think that in our lifetime we will ever see Israel and Saudi Arabia having better relationship? After all, you are half brother, right? Abraham being the common grandfather.
That's my hope, and I said so on Israeli television, and in previous meetings with Israeli individuals in different venues of discussion and so on, whether at Davos or at other places in Munich Security Conference or in various lectures that I gave in other parts of the world. I want to be able to go and pray in the mosque in Jerusalem. That was my late father's dying wish, because after the Israeli occupation, of course, and the war in 1967, that became an impossible visit to make. And my view is that if we could get to that point, we have much to gain from each other. The way I say it is, with Israeli money and Saudi brains, we can go a long way. So this is something that I hope for in my lifetime. As you correctly say, Annie, I'm not, as the Americans say, a spring chicken. And so age will take its toll, not just on physical appearance, but also perhaps on brain capability.
Apart from the Palestinian issue, are there two or three other major issues besides the Palestinians?
Oh, indeed. And our part of the world is full of issues. If I can if you imagine Palestine in the middle, if you go north of Palestine, you have Lebanon, where Iranian influence through the Hezbollah has been destroying the Lebanese state, because Hezbollah is a militia that operates outside the sovereignty of the Lebanese state. If you remember, Hezbollah and Israel went through different military conflicts. When Hezbollah started some of these conflicts, they didn't ask permission from the Lebanese state. They rather got their directions from Tehran. So this was one area where, if we ever achieve peace after Palestine with Israel, that hopefully we can do something about that. If you go east of Palestine, you have the civil war that is taking place in Syria. And since 2011 until today, that country has gone through awful developments, whether it is in refugees leaving because of the activities of the Syrian government and their supporters, the Iranian government, and more recently the Russians as well have been supporting the Syrian government against the Syrian people. More than, I don't know, 10 million people have been turned into refugees, whether outside Syria or inside Syria. That is another hotspot that, other than Palestine, that we have to deal with. If you go further east from there, you have the still unsettled situation in Iraq, where again, under Iranian influence, several militias are still operating inside Iraq, and so far Iraq is still without a government since the election that was held at the beginning of the year, because of the interference of the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. And so these are just issues on the periphery of Palestine that are affected by what happens in Palestine. And further south from our border is Yemen. Yemen, another civil war taking place there since 2011 because of Iranian-backed militia that tried to take over the country back in 2014. And the legitimate government asked for support from the world community, and the kingdom and the coalition of countries came together under United Nations Security Council Resolution 2216, which allows for, under Chapter 7, which allows for military use to help the legitimate government overcome this usurpation of power by the militia al-Houthis. So we have a whole host of issues surrounding Saudi Arabia that we must engage with others to deal with. In Yemen, with the help of the United States and other countries, there has been established a ceasefire. It's a very tentative first step, hopefully, to a peaceful solution. The kingdom has supported that ceasefire since the beginning, and will continue to support it. But it all depends on the masters of the Houthis in Tehran, whether they allow them to fully go for peace in Yemen. And we still have to wait and see.
On the topic of Iran, they are a real threat to its neighbors because, as you said in the private section, their constitution says that they have to export revolution. So it's a threat to Saudi Arabia, it's a threat to Israel and others. And the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And I remember one time I was not with you, but I was with your friend, Khalid Al-Fali, the former minister before that, head of Saudi Aramco. I invited him.
But now he's the minister of investment in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. Anyway, so he was our host together with Lubna Olayan, my other friend from Saudi Arabia. And while we were in the East Coast, in the Arabian Gulf, I have to be careful not to call it something else, in the Arabian Gulf, there was a terrorist attack, probably from Iran, on one of the three refineries. And thank God that your intelligence, your successors are good, trained by you, I'm sure, somehow stop that deal, that terrorist attack before it happened. So do you see that there's a reasonably high possibility that in your lifetime and that of mine, that because of whatever reason, including the enemy of your enemy being my friend, will cause Israel to Saudi Arabia to come together and do the ultimate Abraham Accord?
Well, I've told my Israeli interlocutors that the issue of Palestine is the issue that is used by all of the terrorist groups in our part of the world, whether it is Al-Qaeda, the so-called Islamic State, Hezbollah, Hamas, you name it. They raise the banner of Palestine as saying that we must liberate Palestine, and therefore we use terrorism to achieve that aim. And the Iranians have set up what is called the Al-Quds Brigade, which was headed by the late Soleimani. This is the Revolutionary Guard commander who was assassinated by the Americans in Baghdad. Al-Quds is Jerusalem. So it is the Jerusalem Brigade that the Iranians have established to show how much they will want to interfere in Palestine and in Israel. So this is the big banner that I tell my Israeli interlocutors. If you resolve the Palestinian issue, you will take away from all of these groups their call to arms. When they recruit young Muslims, whether from Saudi Arabia, from the Uyghur community in China, from Iraq, from the United States, from Europe, from Africa, they use Palestine as a recruiting call to that. So solve the Palestinian issue for the benefit of both Palestine, Israel, and the rest of us. And this is where I think the Israelis themselves have to make the choice, whether they want to go that route and resolve the issue that the Arabs have already extended to them through the Arab Peace Initiative, or continue to be the occupier, illegal occupier of the Palestinians under United Nations Security Council, and the colonizers of another people. This is a choice. I think it's not a Hobbesian choice, but it's a choice that the Israelis have to make. You know, either they continue as oppressors of the Palestinians, denying them their rights for a state, for their identity, and so on, or reach a peaceful conclusion to that issue and join the rest of us in fighting the other challenges like Iran, like terrorism, like scientific development, water shortage. All of these things can bring us together.
Well, I'm going to extend this session, if with your permission, Prince Turki,
Sure.
by another
Sure.
10 minutes or 10 or 12 minutes, because we started about 10 minutes late. Is that okay,
Sure.
Prince Turki? Thank
Yes,
you.
I'm available to you.
If there's any question, you can feel free to type it into the chat box, and then our colleagues will take care of it. Now, let me turn to another issue that is very much on everybody's mind, and that is the recent Ukrainian war. That changed a lot of things. Inflation in the world has gone up because of not just energy price, but food price. But energy is certainly a big thing, because the Western Europe will buy less from Russia. I don't think that they can. Do you think that they can totally be free from Russian energy? I would think that they would still have to rely considerably on Russia. But nonetheless, a lessening of that reliance will turn them to the Middle East even more than before. Turn EU to the Middle East, including yourself, Qatar, and whoever else, and now Israel and Egypt. So how do you see the Ukrainian war situation, and how does it impact the Middle East?
Saudi Arabia voted with the United Nations General Assembly resolution condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine and asking Russia to withdraw its military from Ukraine. This is, for us, it's a matter of principle. As I mentioned, and the interference in the affairs of others is a cardinal policy tenet of Saudi Arabian foreign policy. So we hope that the Russians take heed of that and take the advice of the United Nations to stop the aggression against Ukraine. Needless to say, the effect of the war on Ukraine has not been just on energy, as you mentioned, but also on food and trade in general. So the kingdom is a net importer of food. And so we have our issues to deal with now, seeking alternative suppliers of food. And so that is where the kingdom stands on the Ukraine issue now. We've also contributed to the United Nations Fund to help Ukrainian refugees throughout the world. And those Ukrainian nationals who are in Saudi Arabia have been given open-ended visas to stay there as long as they want, without having to leave when their visas end. But on the issue of whether Europe can afford to cut its energy links totally with Russia, I just read, I think yesterday or the day before, the Hungarian government has said that for them, Russian gas is a national interest, and they're not going to give it up because they don't have an alternative. So that's just one country in the EU that has publicly declared that, perhaps whether foolishly or courageously, I don't know.
But they're not the only one that depends on Russian gas.
No. And so we see, for example, in Germany, now they are having to go back to using coal at a time when, the European Union took the decision, I think a couple of years ago or something, that they were going to give up the use of not only coal, but fossil fuels by 2040 or something like that. So the effect of the war in Ukraine has been all-consuming on all of these countries. And you're right. The other alternative to Russian energy supplies is the Middle East. So Europe and other oil importers will have to turn to the Middle East for their source of energy until whenever it comes about the so-called alternative sources of energy like solar and wind and atomic and other very, fashionable sources of energy come on stream. But that's way, way into the future. It's not going to happen overnight. And so, yes, definitely the kingdom and other countries in the Middle East will be available for any energy importer to get their supplies from us.
As far as I'm concerned, the alternative energy, my company is a very green company. But on the other hand, even if you can, the country that use the most green energy, I believe, is about 50%. And even if the whole world go to 50%, you still have another 50% that you need to rely on gas and natural gas and other things such as coal and oil. So nuclear energy would be one alternative, which is old technology. You see the world returning to nuclear, such as following the example of France. Germany decided not to use it, and now they have no choice to go back. Right? Japan had a scare a couple of years ago, a terrible situation where the nuclear reactor blew up or had a problem. So how do you see nuclear?
I'm not an energy expert nor a nuclear expert, but inevitably societies will seek what is best for them. And nuclear energy has been available, since the 1945. And so, and it has developed in many countries, not just in China and Russia, but, in France, in Japan, in other countries, and so on. So the technology is there. And so far, if you take the safety record of nuclear suppliers, we've had, I think, three major issues. We had Chernobyl in Ukraine, ironically, when it was still under the Soviet Union. We had 3 Mile Island in the United States, which nobody remembers nowadays, which was a near tragedy. And then we had the Japanese blow up, as you called it, a few years back. But there are hundreds of nuclear installations throughout the world, performing their task and producing energy, low-cost energy that has been working to supply it to the people. So yes, I think Saudi Arabia, I can speak for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a program to develop civilian use of nuclear energy in the works. And the kingdom has signed deals with many countries, with France, with Russia, with China, with Argentina. I think we have a deal with Japan. Ironically, we still don't have a deal with the United States because they have certain issues with fission and proliferation and so on that they want us to commit to. But now they are not asking the Iranians to stop, nuclear uranium development. So these are still issues working, but the kingdom is decided on having nuclear energy as a source of energy. And the UAE ahead of us has already put in motion, and I think they've already fired up their nuclear reactor to supply energy to Abu Dhabi. So it's going to come inevitably because as I said, the technology is there, and it is doable, and it is workable, and so on. But it's not going to be enough. And even with that supply, as you mentioned, and even if the whole world goes 50% alternative energy, the other 50% will still have to be supplied by oil and gas and coal. So the idea of Saudi Arabia is not to by fiat, by order, stop the development of fossil fuels, but rather work to improve the carbon emissions of fossil fuels. And scientifically, it's been proven to be workable. It might cost some money, it might take some years, but one day it will happen. And so the kingdom in the G20, when it was based in Riyadh in 2020, proposed to the other members what is called the carbon circular economy, which is to use carbon not just as a source of improving the energy supply by injecting it into the ground, but also to use it as a raw material for industrial development. And everybody recognizes that carbon is used in all of the industries now, everywhere, whether it is in the glass industry, in the microchip industry, in steel factories, and so on. There's always a carbon component to these industries. Our human body, I think, along with water, it is composed of carbon molecules. So, if you're going to ban carbon, you're going to ban human beings. So this is something that, those who have taken the position that carbon is totally bad, I think are wrong.
You're right. Your kingdom is close to the United States historically. Your kingdom is also quite close to Russia. I remember your King Salman, your uncle, visited Moscow. And then I think your cousin, the Crown Prince, also visited Moscow. So do you think that the kingdom can be a mediator of sorts between the Russians and the West? And if not, who may fill that role, if anyone?
Well, our Crown Prince
does America want it? Does America want to end the war so soon? Sorry, please.
Well, our Crown Prince offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. This was at the beginning of the conflict that began when was it, January or February? And unfortunately, neither country has responded to the Crown Prince's offer. But I'm sure it is still on the table if they're willing to accept Saudi mediation, because we have good relations with both countries, not only because of food supplies from Ukraine and from Russia, but also because it's a matter of principle. And as we said before, the kingdom stands against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So that's one aspect. Whether we can mediate between Russia and the West, now that's another issue. We've seen what has developed since the Ukraine war started in Western, including the United States, positions towards Russia. Not just sanctions, but some of their leaders, including President Biden and other leaders, Sir Johnson in the UK particularly, have said that they want to weaken Russia. Now, who's to define what is a weak Russia? Is it, they want to destroy 15 divisions of the makeup of Russian army? Is that weakening Russia? We don't know. It's not a precise state of affairs. So I hope that, I saw the statement that came out of the G7 in Munich a few days ago. They said that the matter of peace between Ukraine and Russia should be left to the Ukraine. That's where I think it should be. I don't think it should be dictated by anybody else. And I've told some public gatherings that I had recently that the Ukrainians are the ones who are being killed. It is not US citizens or British citizens or Polish citizens or French citizens or whatever. And definitely it is not Saudi citizens. So nobody should be imposing any conditions on what the outcome of this conflict is going to be other than the Ukrainians themselves. So how they will square that with their Western allies, it's up to the Ukrainians to reach that situation and how they deal with Mr. Putin and the Russian invasion.
I just have one more question. So if anyone want to ask a question, better type into the chat box. We can take another 3 or 4 minutes. And that is, I want to return to a domestic issue of Saudi Arabia, if I may be allowed. One time, an American diplomat told me that your public finance is really quite tough, difficult. I suppose must be because if you're a Saudi citizen, you receive a lot of benefits. And how is your economy and your public finance holding up? What is the future for you domestically?
In 2016, King Salman authorized Crown Prince Mohammed to present what is called Vision 2030, which is how Saudi Arabia will develop its society, its economy, and its well-being in a roadmap to achieve not just social well-being, but also to get us off the oil addiction that we had before that. So on all aspects of society, there has been a development in infrastructure, in education, in medical services, all of these things. Unfortunately, like others, we were hit by COVID-19. We all just 3 years after the program started in 2016, and some of these programs had to be curtailed to meet the challenge of COVID-19. But also, fortunately for us, the kingdom took the steps of not only maintaining the viability of the business community during COVID-19 through government grants and loans and foregoing loans for small business and so on, but also continued to build on the infrastructure that was needed to come out of COVID-19 pandemic with a healthy economy. So this year, for example, it is expected that the kingdom will grow at the rate of between 9 and 10%.
Wow.
Exactly. And these are not Saudi figures. These are, international rating figures. And actually, the World Bank or the IMF, I forget which, gave us a 7% growth rate. But, so that is something that we are working on to go forward. And an example of that, during COVID, from 2019 to until 2022, the number of women in the workplace grew from a percentage of nearly 10% in 2019 to now more than 38%.
Wow.
So, and that's just in 3 years, because the economy has been opened up to the women. So 50% of our population now is active and contributing to the development of the society. And these are just examples of where we are heading. In terms of education, of course, one of the major developments in the kingdom since the visit of President Xi Jinping in Saudi Arabia and the return visit of the king and the crown prince to China has been to establish the teaching of Chinese in Saudi schools from grade 1. Because we recognize, that China is an important partner. And we also recognize that Arabic is very much taught in Chinese universities and schools and so on. So it's a reciprocal arrangement between us and China. And in terms of other educational issues, university population in the kingdom has grown tremendously over the last 10 years, from 7 universities to nearly now maybe 50 or 60 universities. And in the ratings of universities in the world that have come out of Shanghai and London, Saudi universities have now made it in the top 100. at least 3 or 4 of them have crossed that barrier of being one of the top 100 universities in the world. So these are just a few examples of where the kingdom is going.
Well, I'm happy to tell you, Prince Turki, that one of the Hong Kong kids, the president, is now the president of KAUST.
Yes, absolutely.
He's an old friend of ours, who's the former president of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And since I do not see anyone, any question in the chat box, and I think that we've extended 25 minutes beyond what I promised, Prince Turki, you are so gracious to have given us so much time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
From your experience and your wisdom. So we want to thank you as the global trustee of the ASA Society. We're very, very happy to have you on the board. And then thank you very much for spending the time with us today. Hopefully your grandson will be invited one day to speak at the ASA Society, perhaps moderated by my grandson, and it will be Chinese. It will be in Chinese. Thank you.
Well, I hope, Ronnie, thank you so much for hosting me, and thank you for the audience that you presented. And let me just say one thing. Now that you have grilled me and interrogated me for an hour and a half or more and so on, I hope you will give me the chance in the future to let me grill you and interrogate you whenever you have the chance to do that.
I will buy you dinner when you come to Hong Kong, and you can grill me. Thank you very much, Prince.
Thank you.
Faisal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.